Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome to another edition of Legends of Mile High, a podcast that I host, Thomas Hall, and where we talk about history and current events. And today, we're going to talk about Broncos rookies. I mean, it is just shortly after the draft, and people are still curious, I would imagine, about these rookies that they're bringing in, including undrafted free agent rookies. I mean, it's not all about the draft. So we're gonna dive into them, talk a little bit about the future, right? These rookies should be able to stick, right? That's the plan. Stick around, form the nucleus of the team in the near future, so that this Broncos team is ready to compete. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to break down a little bit each of the rookies, not all of them, but the ones that I think will probably stick. We'll definitely talk about the drafted ones for sure to see, my opinion on which of those will stick around and be contributors for the Broncos in the long haul. And we're also going to talk a little bit, if we have time, about some of my favorite undrafted free agent rookies that came into the league and ended up with the Denver Broncos and stuck around. So if we have time to do that, I'm going to definitely jump on that. But in the meantime, before we get started, don't forget to like the show, right? Don't forget to subscribe to Mile High Huddle so you get these early morning notices so you can jump on here and hear a little bit different perspective than the rest of the Mile High Huddle crew, which are all good. They all have some great shows. And I also host a couple others. So join all of them, see which one you like, and definitely like the show. So I appreciate you guys all being here this morning. So let's check in a little bit, see who's here this morning. We got David Youngkin coming in bright and early, first thing. So thank you for being here, David. Really appreciate it. David says, "Morning, Thomas. I think Sanders will be here the longest, and then I am not going to label him, but the safety, if I'm right." Well, I appreciate you being here, David. And I appreciate the comment. We're definitely going to dive into Drew Sanders, who I love that pick. I'm an old timer, love the middle linebackers, inside linebackers, back when they had their heyday. And the Broncos have had some good ones, but I'm a big fan of Sanders. So I'm going to definitely talk about him today. We had Jason O'Neill coming in saying, "Good morning, Thomas," and "Good morning, David." Thomas, I'd be curious what your thoughts about the Broncos inviting XFL players as opposed to bringing in NFL players. Sean Payton fingerprint. That's a good question. They did go into the dip into the XFL, so it's interesting to say that, and we hopefully can hit on that if we have a chance. Appreciate you coming in with that comment. So hopefully we can hit on the XFL players a little bit. There's some interesting ones for sure, man. I definitely am intrigued by a couple of them. So thank you. Also have Jesse Hilborn coming in saying good morning to everyone. So good morning to you, Jesse. Thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone for waking up bright and early on a Friday morning, if it is bright and early where you're at, to be here with me and watching the show. So thank you very much. So let's first talk a little bit about some of the drafted rookies right out of the gate, right? I mean, there's some intriguing drafted rookies. Some of them I like that were drafted much later. Now, the Broncos didn't have a first round pick, right? So, being able to say, oh, these guys are going to make it if they're not first rounders, that's a bit of a stretch because it isn't, it isn't always second, third rounders don't always make it, right? I mean, the numbers show it. And so it is a hard thing to make it in the NFL for the long haul. Most of these rookies, if they don't turn out to be an impact player or a starting player right away, they average, 3 years in the league, and that's it. So these guys are going to struggle to make the team right away. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter is. But the Broncos invested in them, so they want them to stick around. So they're going to give them every chance they get. They can every chance that they can to help them stick around. And so if we can start out with the second round pick. I mean, Riley Moss. Sorry, not Riley Moss. Marvin Mims, the second round pick, wide receiver. I actually kind of like the pick, and the reason why I think he's going to stick around for a couple reasons. Number one, he's probably penciled in right away as the punt returner. I mean, he has a dynamic punt returner in college. He's got speed. He's got skills. And if you can play special teams in the NFL, you stick around. So that's first and foremost for me is a reason why he's going to stick around for longer than many might think. Some people might think he was a reach. Some people might think they drafted him too soon, but the ability to play special teams is always important in the NFL, especially for rookies or players trying to stick around on the roster. Now, he was a second-round pick, so they definitely don't want to get rid of him too early. So they're going to give him, like I said, give him every chance to succeed. But the other part of it is he going to become the nucleus of the team? Is he going to be a major contributor down the road? And I think yes. And the reason why I think that, a couple reasons. Number one, KJ Hamler, right? He's not staying healthy. I just don't think that the team has him in long-term plan. They went out and drafted someone very similar to him, someone maybe a little bit thicker, a little stronger, someone who can probably handle the rigors of the NFL a little better in Marvin Mims. But he's also going to be an unrestricted free agent right away. So, after this season, he's probably not going to stick around with the team. He's probably going to be gone. So that's going to leave the team a little bit thinner at wide receiver, of course. And then there's also these rumors going around about trading another wide receiver, Cortland Sutton being one of those mentioned many times in those trade rumors. So you're going to look, if they do end up trading somebody, that's going to leave the Broncos pretty thin at wide receiver. So that's why I think they really have plans for Marvin Mims to be a really significant player in this offense. So after the first season, after he's, does his work on special teams, he's going to step into probably a starting role or a, third wide receiver role if they don't trade away one of these receivers. That's a significant role, and especially in an offense like Sean Payton, where they end up passing quite a bit. So for me, Marvin Mims is probably the young player who's going to be the solid nucleus of the team in a few years. It just and wide receivers taking the second round tend to be good players. They're one of the highest probabilities of sticking around and becoming a starter, and one of the higher probabilities, if you look at the numbers, of becoming impact players, second and third rounders. So I'm pretty excited about what he has to bring. So that's a big deal to me. I think he's sticking around, and I think he's going to be a solid player. So we got Gary Palmer coming in saying good morning and supporting the show with a super chat. Gary, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Hope you can stick around. We can talk a little bit about the olden days and talk about undrafted free agent rookies that came in that the Broncos, the Broncos fans love. And there's some good ones and some people that you may not think about from way back in the day that I really like, that I'm going to talk about a little bit. So thank you, Gary, for the support. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being here. You're a legend in the Mile High Huddle realm for sure. The second pick coming in, and one of the guys mentioned that, I'm sorry, I think it was David saying Drew Sanders, right? Third round linebacker. I like that guy, man. He's a dynamic player. He seems to be different than the Broncos' current set of inside linebackers. I mean, Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell are all, I like the throwback, they're thumpers that, love to rack up the tackles. I like that. But Drew Sanders has a little bit different element to him, right? He's a little more dynamic, may not have the same instincts as either of those guys. But when you have that versatility and that dynamic ability, you can play in the NFL as long as he has adequate enough instincts to play that inside linebacker position, which I think he does. He can stick around. And number one, like I said, he's going to start out in special teams, and that's the Broncos special teams have been terrible. So any upgrade they can get is a good thing. And I think he's going to be a fantastic addition to those coverage units. But I also think he has a future with the team. One, he's, like I said, dynamic player, young, good tackler. I think he was drafted later than a lot of people projected. I think he's a better player than what his third round status may indicate. But at the same time, you've got Josie Jewell, who's probably going to be gone, after this season, most likely. You got Justin Sternad, who's never really panned out in the, as a starter or coming in as a backup. He's been kind of a liability in that, even though that the team gave him every chance that they could to get him in there. And then you got Jonas Griffith, who's been injured. I mean, I like that guy. I was hoping to see him last year really slide into that starting role and see what he could do, but he got injured. So there's a lot of uncertainty about that position. And I think Drew Sanders is going to step in, within maybe even this season into that starting role and be that key movable piece, somebody that can be moved around and played a little differently if Vance Joseph can figure out how to do it, which is a little bit, I hate to badmouth him. I watched him in the Broncos head coach. I watched him, not bring the best out of Isaiah Simmons. So I really feel like, a little, I guess, cautious about Vance Joseph using him the way that he could be used. But I think he's going to stick around. I think he's going to be the inside linebacker of the future, but also have that good rush ability. So he's going to be a dynamic player. So those are my first two that I think are great, great additions to the team. And we'll stick around. Now the next pick, which was Riley Moss, there's nothing, I don't have anything against Riley Moss as a player. I think he's got a lot of skills. But if you look at the past drafts, cornerback is the most reached for position in all of the draft. They have the hardest time sticking around. Teams will draft them earlier than expected, and they don't make it in the NFL. It's one of the worst. If you look at the numbers, man, the probabilities of them making it, it's just, so that's against them. So teams tend to reach for them, and they tend to not pan out. So that's a little bit going against him. Nothing against the player himself. It's just the numbers. You look at the numbers. That's going against him from the start, unfortunately. Now he's a good player. I mean, he's got speed. He's got ball skills. So I don't want to knock him as a player, but just that alone makes me wonder if he's going to be sticking around for the long haul. And then the other thing is, you've already got two really young, good, solid cornerbacks. You got Patrick Surtain. He's not going anywhere, right? He's an all-pro player. He's going to be, unless there's some sort of injury, knock on wood that there isn't, he's sticking around for the long haul, and it's going to be hard to unseat him. And then you got on the other side, you got Damari Mathis, who is another up-and-coming young player. Very surprised, from his draft status to where he came from to be a starter. He got forced into the starting role, had some struggles, but by the end of the year, he was looking good. I think it's going to be hard to unseat him as a starting cornerback. Then you got Kwan Williams. The only thing that I can say about Kwan Williams is he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So you have a bit of a hole, right, in that kind of slot nickel cornerback position. So there is a shot that Riley Moss is going to kind of take over that role, and he can play a little bit of that slot corner. He can play a little safe. So has versatility, right, which is important. If you're versatile in the NFL, you can play different positions. You tend to stick around. I just have my feeling that he's going to be in the league for a little while and, then kind of struggle to get his footing. I hope I'm wrong. I hope all these players pan out, but there's a few things going against Moss sticking around and being that young nucleus of the team. My guess is when Kwan Williams is gone, they're going to probably bring in another cornerback or re-sign him because he's been a good player to continue to fill that role. And without having that uncertainty of a young player just jumping in and stepping into that role. So I don't like to say, this person isn't going to make it because I want them all to make it. But if I'm going to pick one, that it's Riley Moss that isn't going to be sticking around and be that young nucleus of the team. And then you've got the safety, right? JL Skinner. Now, this is another one that I think was drafted later than what he should have been. I think his pec injury really dropped him down in the draft. He probably had, if he'd stayed healthy and was able to do the testing and all that, he probably would have been a higher draft pick. But, fortunate for the Broncos, he fell down all the way down to the 6th round. Now, 6th round players, don't get me wrong, that's hard for them to make it. You look at the numbers, these later round picks don't make the team very often. They don't stick around, become impact players. But here's the thing. When it comes to safety, if the Broncos don't do anything else, he really only has to beat out 2 players to make the team, right? So you've got Justin Simmons and Catus Stearns are probably penciled in as the starters, of course. And then after that, you got PJ Locke, and you got last year's rookie 5th round choice, Delaren Turner-Yell. So he really just has to unseat one of those backup guys in order to get a to get a spot on the team as a rookie. I think he's going to be a good special teams player too, just like Drew Sanders. So he's going to stick around. I think he could probably. I like De'Aaron Turner-Yell. I thought he had some promise, but he didn't really show out that much. So, for him to jump into that spot, isn't a stretch to think that he can't. And then as he develops, is he going to be that, that heir apparent to Justin Simmons, who's been around for a while? He's going to be unrestricted free agent soon. The team's going to have to make a big choice on him, whether or not to keep him around. Is JL Skinner going to step into that role? I don't know. That's a stretch to think that he can, right? I don't want to put that kind of, high hype on him, but he's definitely going to make the team. And based on his skill and his athleticism, which you can't really see, nobody can really put the numbers to because he couldn't do all the testing. He looks fast. He looks like he has some athleticism, a little bit of development. He could become a pretty solid player. So I think for me, that's someone who has a chance of sticking around. Just want to say hello to Roy Osborne coming in, saying good morning, Thomas. Not sure if Scott is here, but he is here. So he says hi to you, Scott, and he says he likes the overall pick. So thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it. We got Keith Brugman coming in saying, Thomas, how do you contrast Sanders versus Browning? Oh, Keith, thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. You're here on these shows a lot, and we love seeing you. So thank you for being here. And you always have some great questions. So yes. So that was the funny thing that I tweeted out as soon as they drafted Sanders. I said that this is going to be that movable piece in the defense that I thought they could do with Baron Browning once they decided to move him to edge. I thought last year that Baron Browning would be an edge and then could drop back into the inside linebacker in certain packages, move around, and they just didn't do that, right? They didn't seem to utilize him as that versatile player. I think Sanders can be that guy. So that's why I think, he has a rush ability like Browning does. He has some athleticism like Browning does. So there is some, comparisons to what Browning, I guess, could have been in the defense last year, right? He got injured, so maybe that had something to do with it. And then they were pretty thin on the edge with other injuries. So that could be part of it. So he wasn't using that versatile piece. But I think Sanders, if the Broncos defensive coaches are smart, are going to use him more like, I'm not going to compare him to Micah Parsons. Don't get me wrong. He's not as dynamic as that player. But, you use him in different positions, right? Move him around, create packages for him to play. And I think that could have been what Browning had. And I love Browning as an inside linebacker. I think he's a great edge too, if he can stay healthy. I was a little bit disappointed that they moved him to edge when they did, because I liked him at that inside linebacker. But I want to compare him, but I think he's going to be that piece that Browning could have been. So that's my only kind of thoughts on Sanders there. And Keith coming back in saying, Thomas, please talk about my favorite addition to the Broncos made in the 2023 draft, Adam Troutman. Yeah, not drafted, obviously, but traded for in the draft. And I think that was a smart move, right? I think that the Broncos just weren't in the right spots to grab the tight ends that they wanted in the draft. I think they were looking at some, but those players were just gone before they could pick. Although I did like the tight end out of Old Dominion there, Kuntz. I think he could have been a good addition. Really tall, big, athletic, could have developed into something, and they had a chance to get him. They obviously didn't want him, but they did make that trade and they got Troutman. And I like the addition, right? I don't think the team is happy with Alberto for some reason. He doesn't have that skill as a blocker. Maybe that I think he's a dynamic player, not on the level of the elite tight ends. So I think Troutman is going to play a key role, right? You brought him in because he's familiar with Sean Payton. He's good at catching the ball. He's got some ball catching skills. He can block. I like him. I think he's going to have a bigger role. Do I think he's going to unseat Greg Dulcich? No, I don't think so. I like Dulcich. I think he's going to be a very good pass catching tight end in this offense, but Troutman's going to be a good backup. And I think he might be, other than, Manhurt's coming in for that blocking ability, I think Troutman's going to be that first first tight end to come in 2 tight end sets. I think it was a good pickup, and it was smart, right? You didn't have to give up much for him. You got a player who can play in the NFL. He has at least 1 year of starting in the NFL at the Saints. So I think the Broncos made a solid move there. They didn't get the tight ends that they wanted, so they got one that they're familiar with, who they know can pan out and who already has panned out in the league. So yeah, I like the pickup, and I think he's going to be around for a little while, at least this year. I know that he's only got 1 year left on his contract, so they're going to have to make a decision, after this year whether to keep him around. So, but for this year, I think he's going to be a solid addition to the team. So yeah, thank you for that. Jeremy Sean's coming in. Good morning, Jeremy. Thank you for being here this morning on this fine, beautiful morning. The sun's shining, so thank you. Jeremy says, morning, Thomas. I think Moss has a good shot at being a long-term Bronco. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. I know I just talked about him. I had, the numbers show that cornerback is a little bit harder to make it in the league. When they're drafted, I think teams overdraft them. They reach for them. So I hope you're right. I like the kid, man. He's fast, dynamic. He's got good ball skills. I think he's got the skills to make it. I just trying to unseat those starters that are there now is going to be difficult, but I think he's going to be a core special teams player. And if he does, kind of develop and make it on the team, that's great. I think it's going to be an intriguing player. He's going to be an intriguing player to watch, to see how he develops in the NFL and if he can make it or not. And John Payton, when he was at the Saints, had a track record of finding these gems in the mid to later rounds. I mean, he has a history of finding ones that turn into impact players, especially in the third round. He found some gems. So I don't want to go against what Sean Payton wanted there in the draft, and his fingerprints are all over this draft. I think he was running the show. I know that it's a collaboration between him and George Payton, but it was, he put his stamp on that draft right from the beginning. So I hope that you're right. I hope you're right. I think he has the skills to make it. It's just he's going to struggle compared to some of these other positions because of the depth that's there right now and the starters that are there. And then the final pick, Alex Forsyth. I think he's penciled in as the future of the Broncos at center. I don't think he's going to unseat Cushenberry right away. But there's some really solid people out there, Jeff Schwartz being one of them, who are singing his praises. And he has some development to do. But right now, who else is there? If you look at this roster, you've got Cushenberry, who has struggled mightily in the NFL. He's going to be gone after this year, probably, whether he's, turns around and is great or not. He's an unrestricted free agent. And if he's not as good, he's going to be gone anyway. So you got that. You got Kyle Fuller, who came in with a 1-year contract. He's probably going to push Cushenberry, but he's a 1-year deal. After that, you don't have anybody. I mean, it's kind of like they're going to have to draft another center, or they're going to have to develop Alex Forsyth. And Alex fell in the draft. I mean, he wasn't highly touted to begin with, but he didn't do, he should have, in my opinion, he should have went to the, he should have played more in those, those bowls and showcase that. He's not a great athlete, really. He didn't test really well, and I think that kind of dropped him and made people think he's going to be this, fringe player. But when he's on the field, he can play. He can play football, and that's what it takes, right? Even if you're not super athletic as a center, if you can make all the calls and you're smart and you have the ability to hold up against those bull rushes in the center, you can stick around in this league. And the Broncos have a history of finding these late round center gems that turn into something pretty good. You got Tom Nalen, you got Matt Paradis, you got Billy Bryan, a few of these centers who kind of panned out. So I'm hoping he makes it. It's a long shot, it is a long shot, but looking at the roster, it's thin, really thin. And if he has versatility to play in the inside, other positions, that's another plus. And I don't know if he does, but I think he probably does. Okay, Jenny Splash coming in. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you for the support. We really, all of us appreciate that when people come in to support us at these podcasts. Thank you so much. And Jenny Splash says, this seems the first year in a long time where they are not going old Hollywood with their picks and truly seeking young talent. That's interesting. I have not heard that going old Hollywood before. I'm assuming you're saying big names instead of talent, young talent. But I don't know. I agree with you. I think that this draft was different than in the past. Obviously, I mean, I think John Elway, his first few drafts were really good. It's formed a good nucleus of the team, but then he got away from what worked, and he was taking players that had a lot of potential, but they didn't really pan out on they weren't really football players. They were athletes that had potential, or he was going after injured players in hopes that they didn't get injured again, and that came around to bite him as well, because like Jake Butt, for instance, just couldn't stay healthy. A great player, if he could have stayed healthy, but he just couldn't. So I think that was different. It's definitely different than George Payton. I actually have liked both of George Payton's drafts. I think even last year's draft, you're going to see some of those players really step up and be solid players. I don't know about Benito yet, but some of the other later round picks I think are solid. It's unfortunate that they don't have, they don't have a first round pick. So there's not a lot of hope in those impact players stepping in right away as rookies and playing. But yeah, I think it's a solid draft, and I think there is some talent to be had, and I think they picked up some good players too, right, in free agency. So it wasn't just the draft. I think they went out and got good football players regardless of position. And I don't know, I mean, they paid a lot, right? They paid a lot for these players, but that's money, that's cap, that can be, as long as it's not hurting them and bringing in other players that are important, who cares how much they spend? But I like who they got. I mean, I think the free agency period really shored up some positions of weakness on this team. And I think it's I'm with you. I'm excited to see how these free agents and drafts go with Sean Payton and George Payton working together for sure. Now here is a guy that I think has an outside chance of sticking around, right? And it's an undrafted guy, and that's Alex Palczewski, right? Offensive tackle. He no one's going to think much of him because he's an undrafted rookie. The guy's tall. He's got some good weight. His arms are a tad bit short for offensive tackle. And, his knock has been that he's not strong enough to handle the power in the NFL. But that's where the strength and conditioning comes in, right? If they can develop his strength so he can handle that power, he could actually surprise some people. I kind of like this pick, right? And for another reason, the fact that the Broncos don't have really much behind their starters. Isaiah Prince is really the backup for both tackles. And he's been around the league for a while, but he hasn't played that much. He's started a few games. He's played in a few games. But, for being, I think, a 4 or 5 year veteran, he hasn't played that many games. So I think they're really thin, and they're going to need somebody to step up in that backup role. And I actually think it could be Palczewski, right? He may end up on the practice squad, but like I said, if he can develop that strength and handle that power a little bit better, you might see him kind of surprising people. I like that pickup for both of those reasons. But it's interesting to think about looking back at some of these offensive line players that the Broncos have had in the past, who they've developed, who were undrafted or whatever. And offensive linemen tend to stick around if they have the traits and they get a little bit of development in the NFL. They tend to stick around. I mean, I think about Matt Lepsis all the time. Nobody really remembers Matt Lepsis, right? But he was an undrafted guy, kind of, stuck around in the practice squad, developed a little bit. I think he even went to NFL Europe, but I can't remember if that's true or not. But a little bit of development. He became a starting left tackle, and he was a pretty solid left tackle for the Broncos for a while. So I think about that, and hopefully Palczewski is one of those that stick around. Only, not just because I think the Broncos need tackle. I mean, Garrett Bowles isn't getting much younger, and they're going to have to do something about that tackle position. And I'm hoping he sticks around. and prove me right, hopefully. But I mean, not just that, but just hopefully he for his sake too, he sticks around. But they have a history of doing that. All right, I'm going to grab a couple other things here. Talk about a couple other things outside of this. I mean, we've kind of talked about all the rookies. I know there's quite a few more undrafted rookies. A lot of those I think are long. The rest of them are pretty much long shots of making the team. It could surprise. I mean, definitely they always have some surprises, and the Broncos all have over the last 20 years, except for maybe 1 year, I think, have had an undrafted rookie make the team. So hopefully one of them will. And my money's on Pelcheski, so we'll see how it goes. But that's where my money is. I hope he makes the team. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some undrafted rookies from the past. Everybody knows about Rod Smith, one of the greatest wide receivers, to come down the pike, happened to play for the Broncos. The greatest Broncos wide receiver for sure. Gary Palmer coming back in with a super chat. Thank you so much. And he's saying we have had good luck with undrafted free agents. Yeah, absolutely. The Broncos have been, and the thing of it is people talk about, you make more undrafted free agents are playing in the NFL than drafts. Well, that's because more of them come in and, the numbers game, so to speak. But the Broncos have been pretty good about it, right? And I think it's also because the Broncos, a lot of the coaches that have been with the Broncos don't care where you came from, right? They don't care that you weren't drafted. If you can play, you do it. I mean, Dan Reeves was one of those. Mike Shanahan was one of those for sure. And I think Gary Kubiak and even John Fox to a certain extent, they didn't really care where you came from. If you could play, you made the team. But yeah, Rod Smith is he's probably the greatest example of any undrafted rookie, who stuck around, became great, right? And it took him a couple of years to make the team. He came in a couple of years. He played his first catch was in 1995 where he scored the winning touchdown, and the rest was kind of history. But that's one for sure. Then you got Chris Harris Jr. That's another obvious choice, an undrafted rookie free agent who came in and became a star. Super Bowl 50, part of the no-fly zone. I actually, both of those, Rod Smith and Chris Harris Jr. have. I don't know if they're ever going to get in the Hall of Fame, but they actually have an argument. They have a outside chance. I think Rod Smith is, one of those players who have not been given his due. I think he's a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's ever going to get in there. Just as the stats of wide receivers start to grow, he kind of gets knocked down the list, but he has a great argument for it. But so those are two that I'm sure everybody recognizes, but there's two more that go back way back in the day that I love, and they weren't drafted by, and they weren't undrafted free agents by the Broncos, but they made their way to the Broncos. Two incredible greats, Lionel Taylor being one of them, came to the Chicago Bears. And if you have listened to the show, you've heard the story that I told about Lionel Taylor, his time with the Broncos, time with the Bears. Came in, wrote down that he could play any position, so they put him at linebacker. Didn't make it, but then he came to the undrafted. Still came next year. Came to the Broncos, and as a wide receiver, and first wide receiver to have 100 catches in a season. A lot of his seasons were tops in the league. Much later, clear up into the 1990, he was still, his receptions were part of that top 15, even up to 1990. So excellent player that they found, a gem that was misused by the Bears and made their way to the Broncos. And then finally, the last one I'm going to talk about is Rich Tombstone Jackson, another undrafted rookie, went to the Raiders. They tried to play him at linebacker, misused him, packaged him up in a trade, became a steal in that trade, and actually was one of the best defenders for 3 years in all of the NFL. And then he got injured, and that was the end of his career, really. But had he not been injured, he's in the Hall of Fame probably. And I think even Dr. Z, Paul Zimmerman, a legend in Sports Illustrated and writing, he even lobbied for him to be in the Hall of Fame, even with his injury. He said he was the best defender during that time, and I agree with him. So those are my four top undrafted free agents who came into the league and made a name for themselves and became some of the greatest players in the history of the game. I'm going to say hello to Michaela Israel, saying good morning, Tom. Thank you for coming in. Michaela, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Coming in. I don't know if you've been here for the whole show, but thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And we got Michael Ronquillo coming in, the legend, of course, coming with Facebook Stars. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Always appreciate you being here. I hope you were here for the whole show. If not, watch it again. Watch it. If you don't catch the whole thing, it's always on YouTube, so to watch it again. But Michael, thank you. Saying great show today, Thomas Hall and Legends of Mile High. Go Broncos and Buckham. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. All right, folks. I really enjoy being here in the morning talking Broncos with you all. I appreciate it. I'm going to have to wrap up the show now. No Mile High Legend today. Didn't have time to really do the Mile High Legend just because I knew we had so much to talk about when it comes to draft and rookies. So I'm actually not going to be here next week. I'm going to be at a conference, so I won't be able to be here. But so don't tune in Friday morning next week. But I will be back the following week with a Mile High Legend. So I think the legendary undrafted free agent count as the Mile High Legend. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's been some greats. So yeah, thanks for doing that. And Keith Brugman's coming in at the last talking about Mecklenburg. Mecklenburg should have high consideration being a 12th round pick. Yeah. Yeah. And he's, one of the steals of the draft for the Broncos. And Jeremy, thank you. You're today's legend, Thomas. All right. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I love talking football with you guys, especially Broncos football. And I love talking about past Broncos. So I hope that this helps you guys look back and see some of the greats of the past that are getting forgotten about. And that's what I love to do, is bring those keep those guys alive, some of those Broncos legends. So thank you very much. But anyway, not here next week. We'll be here the following week. If you happen to be out at the Tableau conference in Vegas, come say hi. I'll be there. You hit me up on Twitter at Thomas Hall NFL. And otherwise, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Thank you for all for joining. And, as of course, have a great day, Broncos fans.